Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Ultimate Human Experience Podcast. You already know who it is. It's your girl, Brigitta, aka Righteous Sun. And on today's episode, I'm super excited once again to bring on some amazing practitioners from the Hira Collective. We are going to be welcoming Abneet and Brigitta. Please remember to like, subscribe, and share. And yes, remember to share with family and friends and those who you feel will vibe with this message. With that being said, let's get into it. Welcome, everybody. Thank you again for just coming on. I'm loving the episodes. I'm loving the topics and the conversations. And on today's episode, we are talking about flow and rest. And who better to have on this episode than some of the practitioners from the Hira Collective? We have Abneet and Brigitta. And of course, we have the visionary and founder, as well as co-host Rima, and I'm going to pass it off to her so that she can introduce all the beautiful practitioners on her platform. Hey, Rima, how's it going?
Hi, love. Thank you so much for that introduction. I so appreciate you and our continued partnership and love that we're cultivating on this podcast. I am just before we hit record, I was sharing with Abneet and Brigitta how I'm just so grateful for the both of them to be on our episode today, and just like the beauty and the magic that they bring to the conversation around rest and flow. Abneet Kaur Sandhar is a somatic, feminine, juicy practitioner who truly lives and breathes what she teaches and supports and facilitates with all of the folks that she works with. She's an authentic lineage tantra teacher, and there is no conversation that I leave without feeling buzzing with her, feeling back into my feminine, into my flow, into my juice. Even just talking about her, my body starting to fizzle. And then we have Brigitta, and of course, this is in no order, just except for the order from left to right on the screen in front of me. Brigitta is a quantum healer of brains, pains, and traumas. They're also a board-certified naturopath and retired paramedic with over a decade of experience. Brigitta, I remember the first time we connected, and I was not in a good place, but when we met, I just left. The whole time I was smiling because I was like, oh, thank you. I appreciate you. And I even remember saying to you, can we be friends? Just the warmth that you bring in a conversation feels just so rooted and stable and secure. And having the both of you on with both of that experience that I've had being in your presence has helped me feel a sense of rest and flow. Brigitta, you refer to yourself as an undoctor, and I cannot wait for you to share the insight and the juicy discussion as to why you refer to yourself as such. So I'm going to pass it on to you to talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, it's a bit of a heated topic, and thank you for bringing it up. And it's actually interesting because it's not something I talk about, and you're like, do you mind talking about it? And I was like, it's not something I talk about, but I will share it. So it's actually, going back to this topic of patriarchy and rest and flow and all those things. So I actually gave up my license a couple of years ago when I was overseas in Sweden. So naturopathic doctors are regulated based on province and state in North America. And so I wrote all my board exams and decided not to get regulated in Ontario because I was leaving right away. But I did get regulated as an out-of-province practitioner in Alberta. And then a couple of years ago, I gave it up because part of me was wondering why I was doing it. I jumped all the hoops, I did all the things. And then I realized really what they're asking you to do is to continue your education, which I was already doing. And I'm a lifelong learner. So for me, that was a no-brainer. And then to practice ethically, which once again, I don't really need someone overseeing me, nor do I need to pay out thousands of dollars a year for me to be told to practice ethically and to continue to be a lifelong learner, because those are things that are inherent to me. And I realize there's pros and cons to the people that are coming to see me, but it also gives me the freedom to not spend probably half my patient time, just charting and maintaining those things. Of course, like I still maintain charts as I need to. But when we're talking about burnout and, all these things we need to do, so many of my colleagues are fearing their boards coming at them. So they spend probably half their patient time just charting and doing paperwork and all those things. And so that's technically, unpaid time as we look at it from the profession. So when we're looking at how do I show up and be of service to my patients or my clients, well, if I'm not spending probably 10 to 20 hours a week doing that stuff, I can focus on me, I can focus on them, I can be a better practitioner, I can actually spend more time on education and show up better for people that come to see me and serve from a way better place than being in a place of burnout and trying to, once again, be in that, that never ending hamster wheel of being a practitioner and trying to meet all the requirements of all the things and all the deadlines. So it does, it didn't click till you actually brought it up today. I'm like, that was a big piece of it for me, is just that rat race of being a practitioner and the freedom that comes with stepping outside of the expectations. And it was a big one to let go of because you worked so hard for it for so many years to get those boxes and, the expectations of family and society and all those things. And even clinic owners sometimes, right? They're like, hey, what would it take for you to get your license so that we can bill it under insurance? And you're like, that's not a route I'm going. And just seeing what's happened to some of the naturopathic doctors in the last couple of years and just really promoting health and wellness, um, and how they've actually been investigated for those things. So ethically, it didn't sit right for me as well. So there were multiple pieces of it, but I think bringing it back to the burnout piece, that was a big personal reason for me as well.
Dissonance you talk about, and just the authenticity and the how rooted you are in your, much like, I shared with Abneet, like living what you breathe and teach, right? Like, and I just so appreciate that. And I want to just also honor that you recognize this colonial patriarchal system of like the boxes that we need to check in order to be considered verified, right? Like you are a verified doctor. You have now the verification to, create space or, wellness for others. And you're like, no, but I don't want to participate in this because it's actually, there's a dissonance to actually what you're telling us that we need to do, which is create rest and flow and create a life. And so I just really wanted to honor that. Yeah, I mean, I saw you like nodding a lot. I'm like, yeah, I'm like feeling all the juice. So yeah, just take it away.
Yeah, thank you for that. I often tell people that, or what I share from my experiences over the years and how I came into this work 8 years ago, is that we live in the age of the disembodiment disease, and there's just a sense for a lot of women right now that we're coming out of the colonization of the body. So learning how to actually live and breathe and be in a body, a sovereign body that is not ruled by the machine, right? So the work right now that I'm seeing kind of emerging out of the field of the collective consciousness is learning to honor the impulses, the natural impulses that arise from, right now, the hot topic is the woman's body, right? Because women are going to be making a lot of money globally. Like we're going to be taking up a lot of how much money is being made on the planet. It's just going to get more. And power, women are coming into power like never before. But in that process, we can't do it the way it's been done before. Right? It has to come from a place that is decolonized. It has to come from a place that is regenerative, that is feeding the ecology of energy, that is, regenerative, as opposed to capitalistic and sucking energy. And it should be giving us energy the way that we are flowing with our embodiment. So yeah, I'm really passionate. I hear what you say, Brigitta, about burnout. And one of the main ways that I love working with women is helping them heal from burnout and seeing, where has the energy been leaking and in people pleasing and trying to make everyone else happy and adhering to society's rules, right? That is absolutely fucking exhausting. And I don't think that's the way like the design of the world. Like if you look at natural design or whatever you want to call it, great spirit, you know, divine creator, I don't believe that's the way that that energy wants us to be. If you look at nature, it's very harmonized, right? If you look at some of the goddess archetypes in tantra, like Lakshmi, she is giving and receiving energy. It's so beautiful. A lot of these ancient systems of understanding energy are mapped on from nature, right? So I think a lot of this journey is about reclaiming energy and coming back to sovereignty for sure.
I love that.
Yeah.
Can I ask a question? Because I love where this conversation is going. And I know we're supposed to, you know, Rima, you're like, this conversation is going to flow all different ways. How would you say it has shifted for women? It's going out to everybody. It has shifted for women recently. Like, what has been that thing that you have found doing the work that you do, being in relationships with other women, and for yourself personally? How do you feel it is shift to that place of like, no, we want to take back what was ours to begin with? Like when we talk about Mother Earth, right? That's what has been like lost along the way. We don't even want to think it's Mother Nature, it's Mother Earth, but we don't want to even place that in this like where it should be. It's been just underneath the surface. So where do you feel like that has shifted, or the timing for that has shifted for yourself and for just women in general?
Ooh, I'd love to go on this one if that's okay.
Yeah, please.
Yeah, because I think, Abneet, what you were saying, it resonates so much, and from the physiology perspective, right? If we look at the typical 9 to 5, it's set up on the male testosterone cycle. So from a very physiological basis, right? Men's testosterone peaks in the morning, they're on a 24-hour cycle. You know, it basically wanes throughout the day. They wake up in the morning, they're good to go again. So they are synced with the sun. Women are synced with the moon. We have 28-day cycles, right? So we are trying to fit in a society that was created based on men's physiology, and we are not the same at any point in time during our cycle, right? We have very different, usually 4 different, very different stages of, or we can look at it as the 4 seasons, and productivity and creativity as well, right? And then there's that natural rest and hibernation that comes with our moon cycle. So for us to try and fit into a system that was never designed for us, and what I'm seeing is women, and actually I think it was, I don't know if it was 2020 or 2021, but it was called the Great Resignation. And I don't know how many women ended up leaving their full-time jobs because they realized, in with all the lockdowns and being at home, they're like, what am I actually doing? This is never meant for me, right? I appreciate being at home. I appreciate being home with my kids, with my partner, whatever it might be. So I think it's actually opened up a lot of people's eyes to the system that was not working for them, and realizing that actually maybe if we juggle our life around a little bit, live with a little bit less, we can actually have a way better life and reconnect with the earth, reconnect with, you know, we don't need all the stuff, but it's like, what do we actually need to nourish ourselves and to take care of ourselves? And I'm seeing so many, whether we want to call them collectives or tribes or whatever we want to call them, but women supporting women and healing groups for women, and they're existing for men as well. And it's beautiful to see, because I remember growing up as a teenager, like I was a tomboy. You know, there was so much drama and all those things that I didn't want to associate with. And it was girls and women being pitted against each other for so long. And it wasn't till I think a couple of years ago, probably the last decade, that I'm really finding these beautiful women, like we're finding in the Hira Collective as well, just really supporting each other and seeing, you know, it's like I can shine and you can shine and we can all shine. And actually, the brighter you shine, the brighter we're all going to shine, right? It's not a competition. We have these beautiful gifts and abilities that were meant to help support the collective. So we are doing that. And it's just beautiful to see the shift of how women are stepping out of it, and we're deciding how we're going to earn our money, how we're going to exchange our energy, and taking back really our sovereignty, as you were saying, Abneet. And it's beautiful to see. And more women are realizing, like, this 9 to 5 thing is not for me. It's not working because it's just leading to burnout. And it's not, I'm not able to show up the way I want to show up for my family, whatever that looks like, right? So we kind of saw the first wave, and you can just see waves and waves of it continuing, and it's beautiful to see.
Yeah, I often say as well, I feel the true cause of burnout is not working too hard. It's poor boundaries.
Yeah.
Right. It's just trying to make everyone happy all the time, be that good girl, be that, and we're just carrying down the patterns from generational trauma. We're just unconsciously replicating what we saw mom do. Right. But we're not in that system anymore. Like, we're living in a totally new paradigm where a lot of the internalized misogyny that is leading to these symptoms of women being so sick, we're unraveling that internalized misogyny, right? Right. Like Rima, we were speaking before the podcast, right? Just feeling like not feeling guilt about just being human. Right. And a lot of us, like, I still catch myself in that cycle sometimes, like feeling overly guilty or feeling overly bad and beating myself up. And a lot of my clients go through that where the actual work is about releasing that inner critic. Because that's a form of that patriarchal system, Brigitta, that you're talking about. It's like you're a machine and you have to perform, and your value is based on your performance, and your value is based on how much you produce. And the system that I'm building, and that I hope to see build through all the beautiful projects that we're doing, is about coming back to love, coming back to honoring your needs, establishing boundaries, um, releasing internalized misogyny, right? Like really coming back into honoring also what you said about cycles and living in the cyclical system, as opposed to the colonized system or the capitalistic system, which is, again, just ticking off boxes, right?
Such beautiful shares from the both of you. And it has me thinking about, how the Hira Collective is rooted and how it was being built, and how often, even within the Hira Collective, I'm having to defend, right? Why it's being created the way that it is, or how I'm showing up, right? Like, as an employer, right? As both of you know, I haven't been well, so I've had to um, offload a lot of the business um, onto others. And as an employer, a mere check-in, like, hey, how's it going? How's this coming along? Is met by, why are you checking up on me, when really it's coming from a place of, as a woman to another woman, perhaps, as like, how are you doing? And Brigitta, you really touched on the fact that it's women clashing and not really seeing and allowing that grace to exist between ourselves. And it's so important that we allow that, as we're shifting and how we're being, and we ask for clarity, we ask for the boundaries, we ask for what we need, right? Because we're also not mind readers, right? We also can't assume what works for me and my body as a woman would work for either of you, right? So I think, what you were saying, Abneet, yes, we really need to set boundaries, but we also need to communicate those boundaries, right? We need to ensure that we're taking responsibility and empowering ourselves, and what we need and how we show up. And though sometimes our trauma response might be like, oh, you're asking it from a productivity, a patriarchal sense, perhaps unpacking that a little bit and not seeing it as a person, but how we've internalized that, and how we now need to meet with that to ask for clarity or ask for things. Rashida and I have had multiple conversations with our like sister wound, right? The sister wound that her and I carry in the relationship that we're cultivating and co-hosting this podcast, right? And it's been beautiful, and it's been really, really authentic to be like, oh, that's what you meant. Oh, this is what you need. Oh, this is how you need it. I don't know if you wanted to speak on that, Rashid, at all, but I just wanted to throw that in there because it comes up in every podcast, Omo.
It does. It does. But you know what? I think that's really important to speak on because just like everybody said, we've grown up a certain way, and we've internalized that so much that we think that that is the way of living. But we've talked about it before, that like I've never felt that way within my bones. Growing up, I never felt that way. And yet that's what I witnessed. And so I felt like I had to join the party, because if I didn't, I would be squashed just within my own family dynamic. So I felt like I had to shift the way that I was choosing to live, my emotions, just to feel seen or to be heard in some way. But deep in my heart, I was like, that's not who I am. So I can just, my personal example is, if my sisters were mad at each other, any of the women in my family, they would just not speak to each other. We would be in the same house, and if an argument happened, no one's speaking. We all live in the same house. And I would be the person like, so are we going to do this? And I'm sure we could have done it for like months on end to say like, well, let's see who's going to win this. It would always be me saying like, listen, like, we can't just walk around the house and not speak to each other. Like, if that's what you want, then I will assimilate to that and I'll choose to do it. It's not my choice, but if that's how you want to do it, I can shift my energy and make it that way. But I would never do that because it was not like, it wasn't in my bones to do it. But you then go out into the real world and you feel those same feelings because I've just been raised that way. So I think, oh, when I interact with other women, already I feel like they won't like me. That's like my first thought is, there's something wrong. If I say the wrong thing, they're going to be mad at me. They're going to talk behind my back. But that's just my personal experience from growing up. Now it's totally different because I'm like, well, at first I became a mom and that shifted me. Then I have kids, I have girls, and no way am I going to have my girls ever be like that. It never felt good to me. So then I had to start saying, like, as a mom, I don't want to do this by myself. Like, as soon as I had my kids, my family went and disappeared, and I had to figure it out. And then I thought, well, this is tough. God, please send me some women in my life who I can connect with, I can speak with. And through that prayer, I've been, and I continuously do it on a regular basis, bring in the women who I can align with, who I can sit with, who I can grow with, I can heal with. I need that in my life. And it's probably because I need it, because I need it within my bones, within my soul. It's needed for me to grow. So it is really important for us to have these type of conversations and to understand. I loved how you guys were giving different pieces to it, which is like another click for me in like my perspective of how this world works and how I experience the world. Can I ask this question? Because as everybody was talking, I don't know, I think I'm going to throw it to Rima on this one. Now, the Hira Collective, you just posted something on your Instagram, and that was your grandmother and her brother, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
How was their support system? Because as you guys are saying this, and I'm with a partner who I've now had to explain these type of things about, like, the cycles and this. So for him, he experienced life where he just experienced women in his family not getting along. So he internalized growing up, like, women just don't get along. Y'all can never be friends, this and that. And I'm like, that's never true. So we've always had that little like discussion or argument, like, no way, that's not true. And he's like, well, it shows for itself in terms of like situations and experiences that we've seen, that now, especially as my girls are getting older and they're growing up into women, that I am now having to reteach him the things that he learned back in the day in the 80s, where it was like patriarchal, that like, no, they need the rest. It's not a period. We're going to call it a moon cycle. What are the emotions? It's not, and even with my son, it's not that they're on their period, right? Women, I have to sit there and explain to him that women are going through different hormonal situations, everything that's happening. So how can men, or how can the society understand that the switch within women, it's changing, and we now need to like sit back and observe rather than making straight points of, well, it's because of this, or women are difficult, or all these things that they've placed on us, that we then said, okay, well, I guess that's it. Like, but it's not true, obviously, because we're all sitting here and having these beautiful conversations that it is shifting and changing. So how can, like, Rima, like, how was your uncle, right?
Yeah.
able
Well,
to support, how was he able to support your grandmother? Like,
yeah. So my grandmother, oh, a beautiful, beautiful. Thank you for bringing that energy into this conversation, Rashida. So my grandmother, her name is her name that she took in her body was Bopati Hiranandani. Bopati means butterfly, and Hiranandani means diamond. She's the essence of the brand of the Hira Collective. And that was very purposeful, right? That feminine energy, that divinity, knowing that we are shifting how we are showing up, how we are doing business, how we're supporting one another. And though the Hira Collective is not just for women, it is being led by that feminine energy, that divine energy, because that's how my grandmother led. She lost her husband very young. Her husband, my grandmother and my grandfather met in the 1940s, 1950s, and it was a love marriage. He saw her, he fell in love with her, which is very rare, was at that time in India. He was also 10 years younger than my grandmother. And at that time, dowries was was a thing, and my grandfather was very against it. And my grandmother at that point, she was 32 when she got married, which is, considered a spinster back in the 1940s and 50s, right, in India. And my grandmother, getting married wasn't no longer an option for her. And so her brother really held that protective space for her. He kept her very close. She lived with him. That's who I refer to as mama. She lived with him. He had a very protective space around her, but really also honored her need to want to work, which was, again, not something women did at that time, right? And so she worked, and she also sewed. She had noticed that women were being burned due to dowry deaths, or like all these kind, and abused and harmed, and having husbands dying or whatnot. And so she would teach women how to sew, so that they were able to then sell their clothing and get money. And so that my grandmother felt empowered in the space that had been cultivated by her brother, her younger brother, actually. And so she then took that and brought it forward to women to help support them feel empowered. I get emotional and I get chills thinking about it. I can feel the energy off you a little bit, Abneet, too. And her husband, that's what he fell in love with. He fell in love with this divine feminine energy. And again, love marriages were not a thing. They had 3 children. And my grandfather, and the word feminism wasn't really a thing, especially in India, or even a term I think that was coined at that time. But he would always say that my daughters, he had 3 daughters and 2 sons, my daughters are sacred. They are divine. He would protect them. They would always be standing on the inside when they would walk. The 5 of them would walk down the street. He afforded them the same, if not better, opportunities that his sons had, right? He just wanted them to be protected, but also still flourish. So he created that container, but still allowed them to bloom and flourish. My grandfather, my nana, his name means rose, and he very, like the actual rose, and he very much did that, right? He allowed this blooming to exist. And so when it comes to the Hira Collective and honoring those roots, I am honoring the roots of what was taught to me and what was shared to me through this ancestral lineage, as close as my grandparents. But it's also to invite everyone else to come to those roots, right? To those roots of like what, Brigitta was talking about earlier about like, well, we need to come back to like what we need, and that flow of what we need. And like, men follow this cycle and women follow this cycle. And so coming back to those roots of what's so important. And so it's really dynamic, right? About coming back to our roots, doing that in community, because we're not meant to do this alone. We're not meant to be in this individualistic culture. And so I love that question that you've shared, Rashida, because it's not just about how did my grandmother show up powerfully and live, but it was how was she also supported, right? Because she couldn't do that alone either. And she also cultivated relationships with other women. And she had friends and best friends and all that. In fact, when my grandpa, not my grandma, my mama, who passed away last year at the young age of 99, one of the last things he did, he knew he was going to pass. He wasn't, he wasn't sick. No one knew. He called his best friend who lived in Canada. And he said, I just wanted to say thank you for being my friend in this life. And so despite the fact that he was a man, he also leaned into that feminine, that connection, that he understood that, and he lived and breathed that. And I'm getting all emotional. I miss them so much. Yeah. Anyways, I'll pass it on.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Rima. That your story on, for those, you guys can go on, we'll put all the information down below, but like check out the Hira Collective on the Instagram, that post there. It really stuck out to me because I'm learning to accept that within my own relationship and how my partner supports me. And I've had to learn to allow him to support me because I've always been taught that like there's a divide. And as you talk, Brigitta, about the sun and the moon and how they work together, they're not separate. Mm-hmm. That it's something that I'm learning to allow myself to surrender. Like, okay, like I don't have to compete with my partner. He doesn't want to compete with me. He wants to support me in those moments when I need it. I want to be there to support him in those moments when he needs it. And he has those moments where he, like what you just said, he takes in that feminine energy that we all have and will be vulnerable with me in moments when like, I'm just like, wow, thank you that you are just opening up to something that I would have never thought that he would have. But it takes me back in those times because I'm able to just sit there and look at him not just as a man, but also just, I always say, not just even as a soul, but even as like a little boy, because I have a son, right? And they cry, they have their emotions, they have their feelings, but as they get older, that hardens, and then they have a different way of looking at the world. So I just want to say thank you, Rima, for sharing that because it is very inspiring.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. And there's nothing wrong with me crying because I miss them either at all. And it just, I think if anything, it just shows like how deep that love was.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you for holding that space.
Thank you for sharing. And Rashida, if I could add something, I think it's, as you were speaking about how you're educating your partner on different things, I think what's coming through is when we show up differently and we start to teach people about certain things, but also about ourselves, and we hold space differently, then they start to show up differently as well. Right. So I think the beauty is that as we start to act differently and show people what we need and how, we are no longer calling it a period, we're calling it a moon cycle, right? Those little bits of information. It's like eventually we're retraining them. It's like an old dog learning new tricks, right? But the beauty is that, your son is learning and your daughters are learning, and they're going to teach that generation and they're going to show up differently. So we can never underestimate the impact that we have just by showing up differently in the world, right? And changing the way we want things to be, because that has a massive ripple outwardly in so many ways we don't even know.
So beautiful. I want to dovetail off of that and just say that a lot of us have grown up in a fatherless society, and our fathers were the patriarchs, and for some of us that was a lot of unhealthy messaging we got about even our own woman, that maybe we shouldn't have even been born as girls. So I was told jokingly by my father when I was growing up, "Bandi ban." That means be a man, and so that messaging when I was early was like, grow a pair of balls. And at the same time, there's so much incest, there's so much sexual abuse from those same male members of the families. So the messaging, it gets very confusing for a lot of us young ones, women in these patriarchal families. If you were the lucky one and you had a really good dad, this is not directed at you, but most of us had, fathers who were in their own trauma. And so the messaging we got around our own femininity is that our sexuality is valued, but at the same time, we should be like men. And that's something that I'm still unraveling. It's like now that I'm entering my 40s, I'm 41. It's like men aren't looking at me the same way they used to. So it's like, I'm still unraveling what is my value in this world if it's not coming from my sex, and like, what is the value of my education? I have three academic degrees. I have all this trainings I've done in tantra and yoga. Like, doesn't that matter? And what is my own relationship with my inner masculine?
Mm-hmm.
Right? Because a lot of times if we don't look at this wounding around the fathering and the lack of healthy fathering, then we are attracting that male energy that is the same narcissistic, unavailable, avoidant. I can't tell you how many conversations lately I've been having with women around this sort of complex they're stuck in with attracting the same type of energies in their life, male energies. So I think it's a reflection of how we feel and how emotionally available are we to ourselves. So when I talk about the inner refathering journey, it's been so pivotal to my healing and how my business has grown over the last 8 years. It's about holding that Shiva. Shiva means the divine masculine witnessing consciousness, the capacity for me to hold space for myself, that I'm not too much, that my femininity is not a problem to be solved. So the more that I can allow my Shakti, my feminine, to flow, that masculine, that new paradigm, the healthy masculine, just holds space and is like, there's nothing about you that's too much for me. Like, bring it on. Show me your multidimensionality. And that's something that a lot of us growing up did not get from our fathers. We were told, what is that thing? Be seen and not heard. And like, stay in your place, know your place, right? So what would it feel like now for a lot of the people who may be listening to this, who resonate with some of this upbringing and some of this trauma? What would it be like now to instead take from that stance of the inner masculine, say, show me what you got. I want to see all of your multidimensionality, and I want to see all of your intelligence. Right. And we have to be the ones, as women who are reprogramming ourselves, we have to be the ones to do that for ourselves. Because if I'm constantly needing the external world to show up for me that way, that's very, like, I'm a slave now. Right. It's like I'm not in my inner locus of control. Right. So I guess that's my invitation for all of us. Maybe it's even beyond gender, is like, how do I refather myself? How do I remother myself?
Abneet, that was so juicy.
Mm-hmm.
I just feel like I love you. And you know that. And like we've had conversations about that refathering as well.
Yeah.
But it doesn't change the fact that even though you're saying it again, it's feeling like it's being heard the first time for me.
Yeah.
Because of how beautifully you share it with so much humility, in that you're also still unraveling. We're not preaching of like we've got it all figured out, because we don't. We're unlearning and unraveling, and it requires us to have those conversations. And sometimes those conversations have to be a reminder to like kind of put a mirror up and be like, hey dude, you're doing that and I can't be the one to hold that space for you. You need to do it for yourself. Right. And I think that, and that's from a place of empowerment, right? From a place of like, I know you can do it. I don't need to do this for you. I don't need to teach you. I don't need to whatever. And so I just really want to honor and how your invitation comes from such a deep place of empowerment and reminding ourselves of our own power, as opposed to like, again, that patriarchal stance of I will teach you, you will learn and follow. Right. And I just love that. Thank you.
I wanted to ask a question because my brain's always working here. How can I want to touch on this flow and rest. And the reason why I'm saying that, and this is just going for like, this is a broad spectrum. So it's not just about females, but also men as well. All genders. We have been taught that if we are not doing anything, then we're not doing enough. How can we tap into, because to me, when I'm thinking, and I'd like to hear your thoughts on this. When I think about like rest and the joy that we should be finding in the rest, being present, I go straight to my sacral because I feel like that's where it's like that right to feel good. And I want to be able to sit in that. And yet we've been taught that if you sit too long and you just want to feel good in something, then your mind should be on the next thing. Or we've been taught that, like, well, I have to be doing something in order to get the joy or to whatever it might be. How can we like tap into that? Because I've just, those conversations that you guys, like everything that you were saying, has come up a little bit from the conversations I've had with others where they're just like, I can't even find the joy in being where I am because I'm thinking all the external things. I have to get this, I have to do this, but I got to take care of my family. I have all these things. So we start to look outside of ourselves for the things that we might need. And I've learned over time that I'm like, yeah, it wasn't all of the outside stuff. It was me just tapping in, and I'm still learning to tap in more into my sacral and to be able to just be like, what feels good to me? And how can I just be in that moment of rest so that I can absorb and embrace whatever it might feel like, and then be able to push that out in a way of like, ah, like I can rest now. So what would be that like thing for people?
I would love to speak to this because I was really hoping this would come up and somehow I could weave this in. So it's beautiful. Because I think the question is like, how can we be a human being without being a human doing, right? Like,
Yeah.
how do we just be? And from someone who has been, unknowingly in burnout, but like being a paramedic, going back to naturopathic medical school, doing all the things and feeling like you have to have it all under control. And when I retired from paramedicine in the summer of 2021, it took me well over a year to just be able to be without feeling like I had to constantly do. And there's still moments I catch myself where I'm like wolfing down my food. And I'm like, the tones are not going to go off. What am I doing? Right. So it's these ingrained habits. And I think what comes up often is when we go to a place of just rest and stillness, there's a lot of stuff that comes up. And this is the piece of trauma work, right? Is the distraction around doing and maybe even the validation of like, well, I'm accomplishing those external things. And it can be really uncomfortable just to sit with yourself and what could possibly surface in those moments. And so I think this is sometimes the challenge of being a human being is that the uncomfortable stuff is going to start to come up. And, we have a million different coping mechanisms given to us in society, whether it's, drinking, sugar, food, distractions, social media, all the things, right? Pick your thing. We probably all have at least one or two. We're all guilty of it, right? But it's when we sit in that stillness and it's like, how can we be okay with being uncomfortable and really just being in that space? And then it goes back to what Abneet was saying is like, reparenting ourselves, that inner child. Because a lot of that stuff that comes up, yes, it's probably stuff from, our current situation, but it goes so much deeper when we really get to the root of it. Right? It's like what happened in our childhood that led us to believe we had to be productive all the time. What were those expectations? Or, how was I expected to show up in the family? Did I have to be that little adult that took care of my siblings or helped do all the chores or all the things, right? So I think really what the question comes back to is how can we learn to sit in that discomfort without, eating it away, smoking it away, drinking it away, do all those things and really just sit and hold that space. And this is, where the Hira Collective comes in and all the beautiful people that help with trauma work and whatever that somato-emotional piece comes in, right? And this is where we reach out for support and ask, okay, what are those tools I need to bring in to help me work through those things? Because we're not going to be able to do the work for you, but we can give you the tools and help support your nervous system so that we can hold space for you, obviously. But how can you hold space for yourself at the end of the day when you're just like, today I just need to be a sobbing goo and I'm just going to go sit with that snotty snob like snotty sobbing goo of myself that needs to just let this out. Because the analogy that I love so much that I heard from one of my friends, it's like we can try to, do the affirmations and do all those things, but unless we go and dredge out the bucket of all that stuff that's sitting there, we're not going to be okay with sitting in it, because the shit's still at the bottom of the bucket and we're going to sit with that shit. And every time we sit in that quiet, guess what's going to start to come up, right? And having, been a paramedic for so long, it's like paramedics are notorious. They're like, it's fine, I won't deal with it. I'll just keep shoving it down in my backpack. And eventually it's like, the lid's going to blow off. And here we go, PTSD and all the things when you least expect it. And it's like that one little trigger that wasn't even necessarily like, in perspective, what people might say it's that bad, but it's been years of stuff piling up and you just can't keep the lid down anymore.
Yeah.
So I think the conversation really comes back to like, how do we support all of that and how do we get comfortable with the uncomfortable and lean into that work?
So beautiful, Brigitta. Like, I really love the way that even you just feel that even the way when she was speaking, my whole body relaxed. And it's like, so coming back to your question, Rashida, I think Brigitta really nailed it. It's like the question is not so much like, well, no, yeah, I guess she answered your question really beautifully. You said, how do I be okay with being in rest? And she says, be with the shit first. And it's making me think of all the somatic sessions I've been doing with ladies over the years. And it's like we have to give ourselves the permission slip to sit with the discomfort. And often I'll ask my clients, like, where do you feel that in your body? And a lot of the times, like, they think they're going to go on this wild feminine journey with me, and we do. But we always start with the root chakra first, which is the base of safety. I can't have you having erotic experiences and sacred rage and all this stuff that we do in some of the private 12-week journeys, unless that I know that you can hold safety and presence for your wounded inner child. Right? 2020 revealed that. A lot of people were sitting at home. COVID came around and people were like breaking up, going into divorces and all this, people had to sit with themselves. And people are like, oh, maybe I should get a coach. Well, maybe I should get a counselor. It's like, oh my God, I've been go, go, go mode for so long. Like you were saying, Rashida, like growing up in homes where you have to be busy all the time. I wanted to say when you said that, collective trauma response. The need to be busy all the time is a generational collective trauma response. My parents were like that, and maybe their parents before that, right? But if you go back into each one of our lineages, we were all dancing around a fire and singing at some point. So that ability to be in eros, that ability to connect with nature and be in an erotic relationship with nature, to express joy through our bodies, through dance, through bhangra. You can go back to all of our lineages. And there was a point in time when we were not colonized. So before we were colonized, we loved and we got it. We were in communion with nature. I do believe a lot of this inability to sit in rest and feeling guilty about rest is the result of being colonized. So just to bring it back, like just to kind of tie a bow on this a bit, I think it's about the capacity to feel rest is, yeah, like Brigitta said, like sitting with the discomfort and following the thread all the way down. And then also seeing it from an eagle eye vision, seeing it from a larger vision of like, wait a second, where does this pattern actually even come from? What are the systems of oppression that are influencing my guilt? Is it even my guilt? Why do I feel the need to be busy all the time? I often say from my body of work to women, let's get rooted, rested, and radiant. Let's get rooted, rested, and radiant. Let's come back home to ourselves. That's the root. Let's get rested. That's everything we're talking about today. And then comes the feminine radiance. Then comes your essence. Then comes your blueprint. So, yeah.
Wow, Rima, say something.
I shared with our listeners that Abneet Brigitta, they live what they breathe and teach. And I share that Abneet has this juicy feminine, and that Brigitta brings this like sense of calm and like just calm. I can't even think the word, but Abneet, you hit on it. And through this conversation, I felt both sides of this duality. And I'm so grateful to the both of you to bring me back to that space, to help me calm my own nervous system, to feel that sense of rootedness, that rest and radiance. The Hira Collective really, all the practitioners are vetted to ensure that they honor the ancestral lineage of what they practice, because that is an act of decolonization, right? We can't go back and live like we once were, but what we can do in this time frame, in this time of wherever we are at in this ethos, is that we can reclaim those practices. We can come back to those roots. And when we do that, for ourselves, we radiate that outwards and empower others to do that too. And as a result, we raise consciousness. As a result, we heal the world. And though that might sound like an absolutely ridiculously high, tall order, it is one that I believe is possible. And I can honestly say that the 50 practitioners on the platform are committing to that with us, right? And so I am so grateful to the two of you. I do not have all the answers, nor do I think that, the Hira Collective is the answer to it all, but it is one piece of the puzzle that hopefully can enlighten, empower, and raise consciousness in the world in those little corners that need to happen. And for all those listening, Brigitta and Abneet are the practitioners and the healers that can support you in that journey. And so we really hope that you look out for them on the platform to support you on your journey if it feels aligned. But be sure to sign up for our email list for all the updates as we look to launch in the next few weeks. And stay tuned and be part of the community, whatever feels aligned for you as you start to unravel and open your eyes and perhaps seeing a different paradigm in the way that we need to exist.
Thank you, Rima. Thank you. Thank you, Brigitta.
Thank you.
Abneet. What a beautiful conversation. I love the entire thing. Nothing should be like, there's no tweaks. There's nothing that needs to happen. Everything came straight from the heart and from the soul. And I'm very appreciative of all of you coming to the table and sharing your experiences and sharing your work, sharing your wisdom. Much love and blessings. Thank you so much. Guys, this is the Ultimate Human Experience Podcast. We are out. Peace.